The trench had changed since that first night. We spoke less, slept in damp clothes, and watched the fire step like it might open its mouth. By now everyone had heard it. A name spoken in a dead man's voice, an order clipped so sharp your body twitched to obey. We stopped shaving. We tied our whistles twice. Mason was the first to admit it aloud. He said Captain Ellery had called to him from the wire. He imitated the cadence, the quick snap of a syllable, the breath left hanging at the end. Ellery had been buried weeks earlier. No one laughed after that. Boot prints appeared where no boots should. Behind the sentry box beside the dugout door, once across the duckboards behind the captain himself. Always a single trail, right foot deep, left shallow, stopping in a scuff that went nowhere. We stamped them out. By morning they returned, sharper, like something pressing up from underneath. So we made new rules. No answering voices after midnight. No climbing the parapet without two witnesses. We told jokes too loudly to cover the silence. But the hour came anyway. 3:15, steady as the tide. Sergeant Pike called us cowards. He stood at the periscope stump with a flare pistol. If any man bolts at whispers, you'll spend a week in pump house water. When the hour came, the wire sang. Then Major Breck's voice, dead since August, cut Pike's name like a reprimand. Pike fired. The flare lit the wrecked field, showing nothing but churned mud and corpses frozen in place. Satisfied, he lowered the pistol, then froze. His whistle, which had hung from his neck seconds before, lay 5 feet away in the mud. It was threaded on a strip of card stamped with his name and service number. The ink was still wet. 2 nights later, a ration party disappeared. At dawn, their crates sat stacked on the fire step. Tins wiped clean of mud, labels all aligned. No prints around them. The men returned hours later, faces waxen, silent. One kept staring at his empty hands as if something had been taken. Then the letters grew wrong. Envelopes slit and resealed. A pressed flower returned in the wrong envelope. My mother thanked me for sending a leaf I never sent. Each page smelled faintly of smoke and lavender. The patrol broke us. 4 veterans climbed out, moving steady. We waited for the rope signal, safe ground it never tugged. At 3:17, a whistle blew from bare ground to the right. At 3:19, Breck's voice called, "Stand to, steady now." And we stood, because some orders live in the bone. The flare went up crooked, burning a ragged wound in the fog. For a moment, the ground looked alive. Handprints, helmet curves, straps pulled taut by nothing. Then darkness dropped, and something heavy sat beside me. A presence, weight without form. I dared not turn. But on the boards between my boots lay a ration label, paper dissolved to pulp. 4 letters scratched in with a dull nail spelled my name. I did not pick it up. Around me, the others pretended not to see. At dawn, the missing rifles leaned neatly against the step. Bolts warm, safeties on. No tracks, no men. I wrote the night's events in the log. Voices at 3:15, whistle from empty ground, rifles returned. For conclusions, I wrote nothing. The captain signed without looking at me. Now every man ties his whistle twice. We polish boots we may never walk in. And when the hour comes, we don't ask whose voice will call. We only pray it isn't our own. The disappearances escalated. By the end of that week, 5 men were gone. No shots, no screams, no struggle. Just rifles left behind. Mud pressed with footprints that ended in nothing. Command tried to stamp it out. They told the men it was panic, desertion, cowardice. But the trench knew better. At 3:15, they all heard it. The silence before the voices. The wind choking in the wire. Then the whispers, sharp and insistent like a drill sergeant's bark. Private Miller cracked first. He swore he saw lanterns bobbing in no man's land. as if a whole patrol were out there signaling him forward. He fired a flare. In that blinding light, the trench saw them too. Figures moving between the shell holes, pale faces turned toward them, mouths open in silent command. When the flare died, the figures were gone. That night, Miller vanished. His last words, heard by the men beside him, were simple. "Yes, sir." The men began marking the hour. They scratched it into the trench wall, counting the nights until their own names were called. Some begged for transfer, others turned violent, lashing out at shadows. And still the voices came, steady as the guns, precise as a clock. One dawn, the sergeant major made a discovery. A fresh set of boot prints led from the trench lip into no man's land. But when he followed them, the prints doubled back, circled the trench, and ended on the fire step inside the line. The dead weren't calling from outside anymore. They were already among them. Part 4. By now, the trench was a coffin without a lid. Men slept in shifts, ears plugged, rifles clutched like charms. At 3:15, the fear was a living thing. Private Alden, the first to hear the voices, grew gaunt and wild-eyed. He swore he saw Pritchard, the dead sergeant, standing at the end of the trench each night. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but always there, waiting. One bitter morning, Alden was gone. In his bunk, the others found a scrap of paper scrawled in trembling hand. "He says we're already dead." The same day, a patrol failed to return. 6 men gone, rifles stacked neatly at the parapet. Not a trace left behind. Panic broke discipline. Soldiers refused to go on watch. Others swore they'd heard their own names whispered from behind their helmets, breath warm against their ears. One man slit his throat rather than wait for his turn. The officers had no answer. They called it shell shock hysteria, but in their eyes the truth was clear. They were losing men to something they couldn't fight. And then came the night the entire trench fell silent. No guns, no wind. Just a stillness so deep it felt like the world had stopped turning. At 3:15, the voices didn't whisper, they shouted. A chorus of the dead rising together, barking commands no one could ignore. By morning, the trench was empty. When reinforcements arrived 2 days later, they found the position abandoned. Rifles, ammunition, even personal effects were still in place. But of the men, not a single body remained. Reports noted strange details. Boots lined up neatly by the parapet as if the men had stepped out of them. Dog tags scattered in the mud, warm to the touch despite the frost. And on the trench wall, carved deep with a bayonet, a single phrase repeated over and over. "Yes, sir." The official record called it desertion. The men had fled, vanished into the chaos of the front. But whispers carried through the ranks about voices calling at 3:15, about patrols that marched into the fog and never came back. One medic, years later, gave a different account. He claimed he was the last to leave that trench. He swore that as he climbed out, he saw them as comrades standing in no man's land. Pale, motionless, lined up in perfect formation, eyes fixed forward. And at their head, Sergeant Pritchard, mud dripping from his uniform, lips drawn back in a command that never ended. The medic said he ran, but sometimes in dreams he still hears it. In dreams he still hears it. "Advance over the top. Move now." And every time he wakes at exactly 3:15,